Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA.
Nigel here. Did you know the wise time to relieve allergies is at night? With Xyzal. And who better to explain than a wise owl like me? Your allergies won't take a hint when you're tired and ready for bed. Don't suffer the symptoms that bother your sleep. Take Xyzal 24-hour instead. It starts working fast and works while you sleep so you finally get much-needed rest. Then all the next day it's still going strong so you can feel your best. Be wise, all. Take Xyzal at night. Use as directed. Starts working in 45 minutes.
Buckeye Talk is about to begin. Hey, 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 come on in.
Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. I'm Stephen Means, that's Stefan Krajisnik, and that is Andrew Gillis. The NFL Draft is this week starting Thursday. It'll be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Ohio State looking to break some records. Just so you're aware, Ohio State's record for most players drafted in one draft class is 14. They set that record in 2004, headlined by Will Smith as a first-round draft pick. They had two other guys go in the first round as well. That record stood until it was tied in 2020 by LSU's national title team, headlined by Joe Burrow as the number one pick in the NFL draft to the Cincinnati Bengals. And then that record fell in the 2022 NFL draft, thanks to Georgia, headlined by Trayvon Walker going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then last year, Michigan's 2024 draft class, they had 13, so they peaked around that record as well. Ohio State has a chance to break all of those things. They've got 17 players in this NFL draft. Their names are Will Howard, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Emeka Egbuka, G. Scott, Donovan Jackson, Josh Simmons, Seth McLaughlin, Josh Fryer, Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, Tyreek Williams, Ty Hamilton, Cody Simon, Denzel Burke, Jordan Hancock, and Lathan Ransom. All but two of those guys got invited to the NFL Combine. So that's already a good early test of, okay, can this actually happen? Can Ohio State break that record? So it's draft week. So we're going to be doing a lot of draft-centered things. And so I came up with this idea based on something Andrew, Nathan, and I had done a year ago before Stefan had got here about where Ohio State was good at maybe just developing NFL draft picks and where they weren't. I wanted to expand on that and go into maybe the new age idea of position you, quarterback you, running back you, defensive line you, safety you, cornerback you, all the different yous. And I wanted to take into account the recruiting aspect of it, which is where Andrew comes into play, and then the NFL draft aspect of it, which is where Stefan did a lot of his research. I did a little bit of everything because I'm crazy. So it's essentially, what are you getting, what are you doing with them, and what are they turning into when they get out of the door? And we're trying to figure out which position groups Ohio State has a case to be among the teams who can say, we are position you. And we're going to start at quarterback, Andrew, where things are a little weird in terms of the talent acquisition because a lot of the guys who they get don't actually end up being the starting quarterback here.
Yeah, going back and looking at the recruiting classes of Ryan Day is always like a fun little like homework assignment because they didn't get a quarterback in 2019 out of high school, but they got somebody named Justin Fields and he was pretty good. 2020, you get CJ Stroud and you get Jack Miller. 2021, Quinn Ewers and Kyle McCord. Both of those guys are NFL draft picks, yep. And they're just not Ohio State NFL draft picks right now. Then you have Devin Brown, Lincoln Keenholz. 2024 was obviously a unique year, but that's a little bit too early to tell. So it's like, This to me really kind of highlighted the quarterback position, really kind of highlighted something that I was thinking of as I was looking through these classes. Is it the chicken or the egg? Is it nature versus nurture? Like when you go get let's say CJ Stroud out of 2020, Is CJ Stroud the number 2 overall pick if he doesn't go to Ohio State? Probably not. But is he a top 10 pick? Like if CJ Stroud went to Iowa, I'm just picking a team that has a phobia of throwing the football. Or if CJ Stroud went to Notre Dame, or if CJ Stroud, like Michigan, like a team that, I guess maybe Michigan's a bad example because they just had a first round draft pick, but you get my point. Like a team that doesn't produce quarterbacks at that high level, is it well, they just went out and got the best player, and this was kind of always the trajectory that this dude was on, and they were just the guiding hand to get this guy to the NFL? Or did they do something significant in that development? And that to me was the interesting part of looking at this. Because I think you could make a case that, CJ Stroud was always going to be awesome. I think you could make a case that Ryan Day got him to another level and Ohio State got him to another level. So this was interesting. And the quarterback position, especially like when you go from 2 quarterback classes to 0 quarterback classes to transfers out to the national title winner of all these kids is somebody who was at Kansas State for 4 years. It's a unique kind of look at how Ohio State has identified and acquired their quarterbacks in the last 5-6 years.
So here's Ohio State's history of quarterback acquisition. No quarterback in 2019, which is Ryan Day's first year as the head coach here. So he's kind of, he takes over in the middle of December, so he's trying to wrap up that 2019 class. They had a guy who then ended up flipping to Georgia. His name escapes me right now. But C.J. Stroud and Jack Miller in the 2020 class. Jack Miller was originally the top 1 to recruit. Injuries kind of tumbled him down the recruiting rankings there. And while C.J. Stroud used his final summer as a high school kid to start rising up those rankings there. C.J. Stroud's here for 3 years. He ends up being a first-round draft pick. Jack Miller is here for 2 years and then transfers to Florida where he ends up medically retiring. Then you get Kyle McCord in 2021 as a 5-star recruit. He's here for 3 years before transferring to Syracuse. Quinn Ewers, who is kind of like 21, 22. I always put him in the 2022 class for the sake of these conversations because this new thing happened that created the world where he's no longer a 2022 recruiting class. He was not a 2020 class, remember. Number 1 player in that class, 5-star recruit, I put 1 year on my notes, but it's really more like 4 months. He even called it a vacation when we talked to him about it at the combine, and he transfers to Texas. Devin Brown is who they go get when the whole Quinn Ewers saga happens. He's a 4-star recruit, top 50 recruit, who they flipped from USC. He's here for 3 years, and now he's at California battling to be their starting quarterback. And as Andrew mentioned, Lincoln Keenholz is now in year 3 as the 2023 guy. 2024, you get Air Nolan after you lose out on Dylan Raiola there. He's heading into his first year at South Carolina, spent a year here. Taven St. Clair is your 2025 guy as a 5-star. He's a true freshman. And Brady Edmonds as your 2027 5-star recruit. He won't be here for a couple of years. And then you get into the transfers. Because you didn't have a quarterback in 2019, because Dwayne Haskins leaves, Ryan Day looks at his roster and goes, I don't like what I see with Tate Martell and Matthew Baldwin. He goes and gets Justin Fields out of Georgia. He ends up being a first-round draft pick. Gunnar Hoke, you also get that year just because they're trying to get the room to 4. They end up with 3. It's him, Gunnar Hoke, Justin Fields, and Chris Shuganoff, who's already here. You flip him from Kentucky. Tristan Gebbia is the 4th guy in the 2023 room. You get him out of Oregon State. And then as Andrew mentioned, you get Will Howard from Kansas State as the veteran, and then Julian Sand, who is at Alabama for a month. He literally goes through bowl practice and then leaves after Nick Saban retires. And now he's in his 2nd year at Ohio State, where we think he is the favorite to be the starting quarterback in 2024. Stefan, when you look at that list, because all of that happened before you got here, outside of one of those things. The only addition that has happened at quarterback since you have been covering Ohio State is the Brady Edmonds commitment. Everything else here happened before you. When you look at that list as an outsider looking in, what is your first thought?
My first thought is that Ohio State's kind of able to get quarterbacks whichever route they want to go. And I kind of wrote about that a little bit after the end of this past season, and kind of as Will Howard was preparing for the NFL draft, of this was kind of the only thing Ryan Day hasn't done with a quarterback yet, is take a 1-year rental guy and make him into a starter, and make him into, a better NFL draft prospect, maybe a, day 2 potential pick. Because when you go through everything, it's like CJ Stroud was kind of that traditional route. Justin Fields was, he was a portal guy, but you still had to develop him a good bit, right? It wasn't like a 1-year rental out of the portal. You've had guys who have left and gone on to play well, right? Like Kyle McCord was kind of a traditional trajectory, and then he leaves and has maybe his best season with Syracuse. So Ryan Day has kind of done it in all these, different ways of developing quarterbacks. And it's been successful, really, whichever route he's decided to take, right? Like, what's the worst quarterback in this stretch? Kyle McCord in 23? Sorry, 24? No, 23. I don't know what year it is anymore. Like that's the worst play you had under Ryan Day, and that was still pretty good, relatively speaking, across the country. So it's pretty fascinating to look at this, and I think there's definitely a conversation to be had at this position about QBU.
He's the worst of the bunch, and his only loss as a starter. He started 12 games in 2023, and then he also had to start in 2021 when CJ was dealing with a shoulder injury, was to the eventual national champions. Now, the context is those eventual national champions are your rivals, so you can't lose to those guys. But still, that's what we're talking about. That's the bar, how high the bar is. So then you look at it from how many of those guys have actually ended up being starters here, which I think, Stefan, is a difficult conversation at quarterback because I just listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 quarterbacks have spent time in this quarterback room since 2019. And only 4 of them ended up being starters here. But that's the norm, right? Only one guy can start. Justin Fields is the starter in 19 and 20. He goes 13-1 in 2019, and then in 2020 he goes 7-1, gets to the national championship game, 2 Big Ten championships, a Heisman Trophy finalist in 2019, and he's a first-round draft pick to Chicago Bears in the 21 NFL draft. And then C.J. Stroud takes over. He goes 11-2 in 2021, and then he goes 11-2. No, excuse me. He went 10-2 in 2021 because he missed the game because Kyle McCord started 10-2 in 2021, 11-2 in 2022. So that's 21-4 in his career as Ohio State starting quarterback, 2-time Heisman Trophy finalist, 2-time Big Ten Offensive Player and Quarterback of the Year, first-round draft pick, number 2 pick in the 2023 draft to the Houston Texans. And then Kyle McCord, he goes 12-1 as a starter, 11-1 as the full-time starter in 2023. His only loss is to Michigan at the end of his tenure here before he opts in the portal. And then he's at Syracuse last year where he broke a bunch of records. And it's TBD on where he ends up getting drafted, just like with Will Howard. He goes 14-2, wins a national title, but that's it. There's no individual accolades for Will Howard. Dylan Gabriel got all the individual accolades that we've often seen the Ohio State quarterbacks get. And it's TBD on where he'll get drafted here. What do you think of that percentage, Andrew? Like, I don't know. Good, bad, and different. You got 2 5-star recruits, one of which you got by transfer. Your other transfer won a national championship, and 2 of these guys have been Heisman Trophy finalists. Do they have a case that Ohio State since 2019 is QBU?
I think so. I think they have a case because it is so hard to replicate. Like, it is so hard to go from Fields to Stroud to, I don't know, who would be, I guess, that in place of McCord guy who came out like, who was in the draft last year that you could look at and go, wow, that guy was I mean, JJ McCarthy, maybe like he was a top 10 pick. Who else was a top 10 pick last year? Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, like those are all programs that you look at and they hadn't had that, right? Like LSU had Burrow and then they didn't have anybody to Jaden Daniels, and both those guys were transfers in. So, they did well for themselves there. Michigan had McCarthy as a top 10 pick. Michigan hadn't had anybody there. So yeah, I think they absolutely deserve kind of consideration here because you're going to have misses in recruiting in general. Like I mapped out the entire 2022 class and all 4 receivers have gone. The running back, Dallin Hayden, has gone. The quarterback, Devin Brown, has gone. 2 of your 4 offensive linemen have gone. Like the 2022 class was not great. 2023 looks a little bit kind of like a heavy hitter. But I think especially a quarterback, you're going to miss. You're going to have a guy who comes in and you go, he's just not going to start here. But that's okay because they are recruiting at a clip to where you have a CJ Stroud. Even the guys that they have had leave, Quinn Ewers and Kyle McCord, I mean, they're NFL players, right? It's like we could like Stefan was kind of pointing out, oh, that 2023 might be the worst quarterback season you've had under Ryan Day, and blah blah blah. And look, Kyle McCord had some brain fart moments, but like nobody doubted that Kyle McCord was an NFL draft pick. Nobody's looking at Kyle McCord and going, the worst quarterback that's ever lived, get him out of here. He's a mid-round guy. Quinn Ewers is the same conversation. I mean, he was only here for a few months, but he's an NFL draft pick. So yeah, I think they absolutely have that because it is just so hard to do it, but they are and have been recruiting at a clip to where, man, even if you miss a few times, the hits are going to be not just hits, they're going to be home runs.
Well, some of it too is like, I don't even know how many times you can call it a miss just because of the way the position works, right? Like, we don't know if Devin Brown's a miss. He got beat out by Kyle McCord and Will Howard, you know? And those are both guys that we're going to see go in the NFL draft this year. So that's kind of the interesting part of this quarterback conversation is that, I mean, you said with LSU, but there's not that much time between Burrow and Jaden Daniels. Like, it's quarterback. Like, it's like you can produce 3 wide receivers in a draft. Like, going Burrow and Jaden Daniels is actually kind of quick and pretty impressive. Like, Ohio State, the stretch that they've been on is crazy impressive because relatively speaking, there hasn't been a miss because you just need one guy to hit. Like you don't need, like when Julian Fleming misses, that's maybe a bit more out there because, like, it's tough to make up. Whereas at quarterback, you've got other options. You just need one of them to hit.
And we're at the right school where, Stefan, that language works of we don't know if the guy who didn't win the job is a miss because of who he lost to.
Right.
Right? Because if you go back to 2018, it's like, oh, was Joe Burrow a miss? No, he lost out to a dude who broke a bunch of records.
Right.
And then you get to LSU. It's the first year he was fine. But 2019, he goes nuclear. It's like, oh, Joe Burrow's really good. It's just Dwayne Haskins was better.
Yeah, 2023 is probably the one year you circle it where you say, you don't know.
Right.
And we'll find out, I guess. We'll see how good Kyle McCord really is like in the future here. And we'll see how good Devin Brown is at Cal. And who knows, maybe they're both really good.
Well, there's also the case to be made of, and that's why with this one specifically, I wanted to single out the starters in a way that you can't really do with the other groups.
Right.
Regardless of what happens this weekend, Ryan Day is going to get the Sunday evening and still be able to say every single guy that has started for me since I've been a head coach has been an NFL draft pick. And it's quarterback, so depending how weird this gets, he might be able to say that by the end of the night Saturday. Right? You've got 2 guys who are first-round draft picks, and Andrew just kind of said, Kyle McCord's going to get drafted this weekend. Will Howard is going to get drafted this weekend. Will Howard might have been drafted last year. He came here because he didn't want to be a 6th or 7th round draft pick. He wanted to be a 1st or 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. So if we get to the end of Saturday night and we have seen Kyle McCord and Will Howard come off the board. Now, if you're an Ohio State fan, of course, you want that order to be Will Howard, Kyle McCord. But if those guys get drafted, I don't think there's misses. It's just a result of the standard at Ohio State being so unreasonably high that 12-1 and losing to the eventual national championship winner isn't good enough. With Will Howard, it ended up being good enough going 10-2 in the regular season because they went on a crazy run in the playoff that Kyle McCord wasn't given. But you know what I mean? Like, Will Howard is a national champion, but he's the 4th best, I think, from a talent standpoint of these 4. But he's not. That's how high the standard is. The 4th best guy from a raw talent standpoint is the national champion, while 2 others are Heisman Trophy finalists, and another one is going to be a draft pick, regardless of how he kind of left here in a way that didn't make fans feel. So here's my last question here. We all think they have a case for quarterback U. Do we think they are the case? Are they number 1 on the list? And we don't have to run through everybody's history here, but are they number 1?
So here's one thing I struggle with. How much does NFL success matter in this?
Because I don't think it's a college's job to turn you into a Pro Bowl all pro. I think their job is to get you there, and then what you do once you're there is kind of on you. It's almost like let's put it in our realm, right? I don't think we all went to college. Andrew went to OU, and he's wearing an OU hat right now. I went to Kent State, and Stefan went to Indiana. I don't think it was Ohio, Kent State, and Indiana's job to make us the greatest sports writer on the planet. I think it was their job to develop us and prepare us to get a job. And, well, we're all on this pod, so they succeeded, right? They did their job.
Depends on your thoughts about this pod, I guess.
I mean, that's fair. No, that's fair. But I don't know.
At Kent State, they just want to get you out there. At OU, they really try to make you elite. They really develop you in a great way.
Mary Kay Cabot went to Kent State, by the way.
I know she did.
All right. I don't know any OU guys who are Mary Kay Cabot level. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying, like, I guess, are you docking them more because Ohio State quarterbacks before C.J. Stroud hadn't really hit, or are you giving them more credit because C.J. Stroud is awesome?
Probably a little bit of both, but probably more so the former. I think
Okay.
Ohio State gets docked a little bit because the guys haven't panned out as well in the NFL.
So who would you put? You'd put LSU there because Joe Burrow's good and Jaden Daniels is, even though they
consider LSU. This is where like the history of it gets kind of interesting because Oklahoma's got a case. You're talking about Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray,
right?
And then one thing that was interesting that I jotted down is like, and Jalen Hurts, obviously Oklahoma too. But then it's like Bama's going to try to claim him, and then it's like, well, Dylan Gabriel had a really good year with Oklahoma. And then it's like, well, Caleb Williams did start at Oklahoma and had a pretty decent year before he transferred. Yeah. So then it's like, okay, well, Kyle McCord had a decent year at Ohio State. Quentin Ewers started at Ohio State. Joe Burrow started at Ohio State. So it's like the portal has made this a crazy conversation. I would probably – LSU's last two have been so loud, right? We're talking, an MVP.
But they also have Jamarcus Russell as a number one pick. Well, no, that's fair. If we're just going to 2019, I think it is – you're right. I guess – to not make this a 4-hour-long pod,
right?
For you to just go to Oklahoma immediately means the answer to my question is no. They're not like certified number one. The conversation starts with them, but they are in the room and they can make their case, Andrew.
Yeah. Whatever kind of the timeline is, the window that you want to choose, you can kind of make a case for anyone. If we are talking like Ryan Day era, so we want to talk like since 2019, it's probably LSU or Ohio State.
Probably, because then Lincoln loses Kyler Murray and Baker, and he's just got the year at Oklahoma with Jalen Hurts, and then he's got Spencer Rattler was a kind of his Kyle McCord, where he's good, but he's not like he wasn't the first rounder, and then Caleb Williams. So yeah, it probably is just those two. That's fair, but we don't have to because that's a whole other hour and a half long pod that we don't have time for. But I think, that's if we can easily name somebody else, then the answer is going to be no. Okay, let's move on to running back. Andrew, what do you think of Ohio State's running back recruiting? Because I feel like it's the tale of two stories. It's almost the first half of the day airs like, what is happening here? And then the second half is like, this is how it should always look.
Oh, boy. It was worse than I thought.
Yes. That's much worse than I thought.
Yeah. Look, obviously, people that have, listened to this pod for a long time know that my first year on the beat was for the 2023 season. I joined right as that was getting going. I didn't know who Marcus Crowley was. And he was Ohio State's commit in 2019. And then you get Mookie Cooper and Mayan Williams in 2020. And then you get Trayvon Henderson, and that's your home run, right? Like that is obviously the guy who, I mean, I mentioned him on the pod as somebody who it's like, I can't get him out of my head, is like a team sitting there at 31 going, you know what? We need that speed. We're going to take him. So he's, elite. But Evan Pryor, Dallin Hayden, they didn't have a running back in 2023, at least out of high school. And then in 2024, you go get Sam Williams-Dixon and James Peoples, and that obviously looks like it's going to be pretty solid because Peoples looks like he's going to be pretty good. I know Steele Chambers started as a running back, and then he moved to linebacker. So it's like, okay, well, maybe your best running back on the 2019 recruiting class was a linebacker. So it's like, it hasn't been as good as you might think. And that, I think, was surprising to me to write all this down and go, oh, yeah, oh, wow, this is not what I thought it was at all. Because, you had Travion Henderson, but I think it's easy to forget, in 2023 when he went down, think about how they were kind of hurting for some running back depth. And then in 2024, obviously, you go get Quinshawn out of the portal, and it was like, oh, well, they have the best running back tandem in the sport. And now you have James Peoples. And it turned on a dime. And now it's easy to look at and say, oh, well, yeah, when Trayvon's healthy, they're great. And in 2024, they were great. But historically, they have not recruited the running back position well under Ryan Day.
So you mentioned Mookie Cooper. I'm going to save him for wide receiver just because he ended up in the wide receiver room. The good thing about this exercise is, listen, it's like a history lesson for you guys to see where you're. I'm glad you said you didn't know who Marcus Crowley was. You weren't here when he got here. And you weren't
never
here.
Heard of him.
And you were 2 years from getting here when his career ended here. So I get it. So here's the list. Still Chambers, who there were conversations about him moving to linebacker even when he was going to being a recruit. He starts out in the running back room. And Marcus Crowley, those are your two 2019 guys. Still Chambers spends 5 years here. He's a 2-year starter at linebacker, which means we'll put a pin in him for when we do defense tomorrow. Marcus Crowley was the other guy in that class. He spent 3 years here. He ends up having to medically retire after 2021 season, which is why you don't know who he is, Andrew. Mayan Williams ends up, I think he's a hit because you got him in 2020 because you missed out on Kendall Milton to Georgia, and more importantly, you missed out on Bijan Robinson to Texas, even though you had him silently committed to you. He's a 3-star guy. He ends up being a 2-year starter for you and pretty productive here. And then this is where Tony Alford gets his act together. Travion Henderson, 5-star recruit. He's a 4-year starter for you. Evan Pryor, top 100 recruit, spends 2 years here and then transfers to Cincy, which is essentially a reset for him after an injury kind of got in the way of his freshman year to begin with. So this was just a chance for him to reset. Dallin Hayden is who you get in 2022. He transfers to Colorado after 2 years. Andrew mentioned they were kind of hurting after Travion went down in 2023 with an injury. Part of the reason they were kind of hurting is because Mayan Williams is also in and out the lineup. And Dallin Hayden, they were trying to not blow his red shirt because they had
then they had Chip train him, and that was their answer.
Which, again, we have to put a pin in him because he's a defensive conversation first. So we'll save that one. James Peoples, top borderline top 100 recruit in 2024. He's entering year 2 for you this year. He's supposed to be a starter. Sam Williams-Dixon, the other guy in 2024, he's entering year 2. Went to the portal, but changed his mind. And then this is where you get Carlos Lachlan, essentially getting the room back to where it's supposed to be. Turbo Rogers is the 97 player in that class. Bo Jackson, 160 in that class. Isaiah West, 729 in that class. And then 3 transfers in the Day era. Trey Sermon in 2020, who turns into Ezekiel Elliott for the last 2 games of his career here. He ends up being a 3rd-round draft pick. That is so far still the only running back at Ohio State in the Day era who has been drafted. Now, that's going to change this weekend with Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Judkins. But right for the next couple of days here, people listening to this pod on a Tuesday, Trey Sermon, an Oklahoma transfer, is still the only running back they've ever had drafted. And then Quinshawn Judkins out of Ole Miss spends a year here. He'll get drafted this weekend. And then C.J. Donaldson, who's trying to repeat the success of Quinshawn Judkins. Maybe he'll be a draft pick next spring at this time.
Wait, am I misunderstanding what the timeline is you're going on? Wasn't J.K. Dobbins technically in the Day? He was taken in 2020, right?
No, J.K. Well, I didn't keep J.K. here because he's not like full Day. His first 2 years here.
Okay. I thought you were just talking about guys getting drafted since Day was coach.
And I knew there's going to be some spots where that comes up. It's people who came here while Day was the head coach and left and got drafted while Day was the head coach. And this is not the first time we're going to have that conversation. Mm-hmm. So far, yes, Trey Sermon is the only player that's been added to the roster since Ryan Day was the head coach who has gone on to be a draft pick.
So you guys have covered college football for a while, so I wanted to ask you guys this because I was thinking about this as I kind of mapped out my list, and I was like, who in the world is Marcus Crowley? Is running back... I said at the beginning at the jump of the pod that especially as you talk about like recruiting and like player acquisition, is it like a nature versus nurture conversation? Is it, hey, you just got this player who was sick and all you kind of had to do was just like,
keep
him on the guardrail and keep him on the path and it was going to be fine? Is running back the most nature position of that conversation, to where it's at receiver, at quarterback, at tight end, at offensive line, there is a lot of development that has to happen? Is running back the most, you've got to have a better talent eye? Does that make sense? Like if you have a
Probably.
better eye for talent at running back, you have a better chance of hitting than if you have a better eye for talent at offensive lineman. You know, like if you go get the dude, that is easier to install that guy in your offense than any other position on the offense. Is that a fair thing to suggest?
I think Carlos Laughlin's going to hate us. I think it's the position where you have the least, as a coach, you have the least amount of impact on their ceiling. But I do think there is a significant impact on their floor.
I think that's a good way to put it.
And I don't know how high the ceilings were of Steel Chambers and Marcus Crowley as running backs. I don't think Byron Williams's was very high, but I think his floor got significantly raised. Now, I think him just not playing football last year was kind of weird, though if he was just trying to get healthy, I get that. But Travion Henderson arrived with a pretty high ceiling. He also had pretty low floor because he had never really learned how to read holes and how to, he just was bigger and faster and stronger than everybody else. He averaged a first down a carry in high school, playing at Hopewell High School in Virginia. So I think Carlos Laughlin raised his floor, which is why, Stefan, you and I have had conversation about, hey, should he be like a first-round pick as a running back? I think Quinshon Judkins' floor got significantly raised during his career, and part of that is because of what he was doing at Ole Miss, right? I don't think anybody thought he was going to be a record-breaking running back when he first got to Ole Miss, right? So that's raising his floor. And so let's see what happens with the rest of these guys. But I do think maybe we're judging less by, are you turning 5 stars in the day one draft picks, and what are you doing with what is Carlos Laughlin going to do with Isaiah West more than it is what is Carlos Laughlin going to do with Bo Jackson?
Right. Yeah, because I think one of the things that I know is a strategy that Ohio State wants to implement is a little bit like if you look at recruiting like an NFL draft, where it's all right, you got your top round guy and you kind of just got to keep him on that trajectory. And that is something where it's like, all right, man, he's got all the ability. We got to keep him there. But there's also this, kind of theory that if you take 2 running backs, then you're taking a mid to lower round guy, just because it's hard to kind of convince 2 top guys to come in. And, you can develop that lower round guy. So, yeah, I think Isaiah West is kind of a really good example to bring up there, because, if you have Isaiah West and Bo Jackson, Bo Jackson is your guy where you look at and you go, oh, well, he's the elite recruit. He's the guy that everybody was after, blah, blah, blah. Isaiah West was a little bit more unheralded, and, maybe it's a little bit more of a development track. I think that makes sense.
So what do we think of this, Stefan? What do you think of Ohio State's running back U case when, as you had to mention, J.K. Dobbins, sure, but also they got a year of him. When the facts of the matter are, running back recruiting has been a little weird here, and they have 1 draft picked so far of guys who have been added since they became the head coach. Yeah. Is there even a case right now, even if it gets to 3 guys after this weekend?
Probably not, but it is interesting looking at it. If you do want to count J.K. Dobbins, it gets interesting, because I think Bama's kind of the one that sticks out right away. Just the guys that they've been able to churn. Even Georgia in recent years has some pretty good guys come out of there. I think Ohio State's, for as uninspiring as the recruiting has seemed sometimes, it is actually a better case than you would think, just because Travion panned out, Trey Sermon was a hit. Obviously Quinshon is going to be a hit for you, and what he was able to do after transferring. And, you kind of look at the future of the room, you're starting to feel a bit better. So they probably don't have a case right now, but I think you can kind of look over the course of the next 3 to 4 years and be like, okay, they're on the right path here, to where if we're having a conversation in 3 years about running back, you're going to start listing off some names from Ohio State. And you're going to be like, okay, there's actually a better case here than I would have thought.
I think they can get in the room and start yelling. Yeah. I don't know how many people are going to pay attention, because you mentioned Bama. I mean, with Georgia, is doing right now. Those two teams are just gonna be like I feel like those two schools are gonna look at everybody else and go, yeah, shh, shh, shh. Adults are talking. And I don't know what changes. Now, maybe Bama might start falling off a little bit if now that Saban is gone, and they might be changing their offensive approach a little bit and being more of a throw it around school. But Georgia, as long as Kirby Smart is there, I'm not sure anybody can take that crown from him.
Yeah, and they're obviously going to have ETN this year. It's the case for Ohio State is that when you have two guys in one draft that can go pretty high, it's going to help your average pretty quickly, right?
Yeah.
Ohio State is a very new money entrant into that country club of running back U, right? Like they are. I
think they're old money who just hasn't been doing it because if we want to do like a pre Ryan Day thing,
if we want to, I'm saying like in Ryan, like in the last
the Day era,
the Day era, it's very much like because you're not touting like Trey Sermon up against like Jahmyr Gibbs and being like, let's flex muscles here. Like you're gonna lose that. You're going to lose that Jahmyr Gibbs conversation. You're going to lose who else does Alabama have?
You could do Jahmyr Gibbs versus Quinshon Judkins.
You want to know what it is?
So then once you start to get into the later eras and the newer times, then you got a case.
You want to know what it is, and Andrew, you're going to like this.
Jahmyr Gibbs is newer times. He's a transfer like 2 or 3 years ago.
It's like on the wire, man. It's like if this was the old days. The thing about the old days.
The old days. Good reference. Any wire references that anybody wants to say on this podcast or text us 614-350-3315, you immediately get a bonus point that I just made up in my head.
Does Ohio State have to be running back U to get good running backs in here?
Probably not. I mean, look at what Travion and Quinshon were able to do, balancing the workload in an offense that still was loaded at wide receiver,
I think it's the one spot where it doesn't matter what their reputation is because they're selling, especially now that they're selling a very different thing. They're looking for specific personalities in terms of, I'm okay sharing a backfield because I would like to get to my second contract in the NFL. Versus, I want the ball 300 times for 3 years and I'm going to go to the NFL and have the Ezekiel Elliott where I'm awesome, but I'm also slowly dying career-wise every year because they just keep giving me the ball.
This could be the position where it's maybe the inverse of what we were just saying at quarterback, where maybe it helps Ohio State's case when these guys do pan out in the NFL.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, like, we know, and the people who watched Ohio State a ton know, Travion and Quinshon were amazing last year. 1,000-plus yards. On the outside, Ole Miss fans are saying, oh, look at how Quinshon's numbers dropped. He played 16 games and his numbers still dropped. And it's like, watch the games. So I think there's going to be a lot of that where it's like there's going to be a next Ohio State running back where you're just like, well, his numbers weren't great. Like he wasn't, competing for Heisman's or putting up J.K. Dobbins type numbers and stuff like that. And it's like, in 5 years, you're going to be saying, oh, what school is running back you? Okay, well, Quinshon Judkins went to Ohio State, and Travion Henderson went to Ohio State, and this guy went to Ohio State. You're like, yeah, but when they were at Ohio State, you weren't talking about them like that. But now you want to say they're running back you because they've been so good in the NFL because they have longevity and they could do things that aren't, going to end their career in 3 years at the NFL.
Which Dobbins is the example. He got the ball 301 times his last year here. He's been good when he's been healthy in the NFL, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy in the NFL. So I think this is how does Ohio State get into this conversation? The more of these running backs that get to their second contract, the more of these guys that are 25 and older and still playing good football in the NFL, the better. Because then you can go to the 16 and 17-year-old and go, look, my guys are 26, 27, and they're still making good money. They're not getting waived and can't find a job even though they've got good tread still on their tires because people think that their careers are over with yet. So that's their kick. With the quarterbacks, it's like, just keep doing what you're doing. With the running backs, this is like a 5-year investment. So when Buckeye Talk, when we're all 40 doing this, we can go, is Ohio State running back you? And be like, yeah, look, Travion's 34 years old and he's still cooking. Okay.
By the way, Daniel Jeremiah, who I think is a pretty good like NFL draft guy, like previewing and scouting and stuff like that. He was on Part of My Take earlier this week, and he casually dropped. He's like, with the way that Travion pass pros, like, don't be shocked if the Bears take him at number 10. It's like, dude, like that stuff goes a long way.
You two root for the worst sports teams ever.
You too? What do you mean you two?
The
Your
Falcons are
Orioles just
better
lost
last year.
24-2. First
I don't
of
know
all,
what you're talking about. We're talking about football.
first of all, the Falcons have promise. We don't have a quarterback. We have promise and an expensive offense, and not a quarterback. You root for the Bears.
Promise. We got Ben Johnson, prodigy of Ryan Day, kind of.
You also root for the White Sox, which we watched the man re-injure his hamstring 2 yards away from tying the game.
Listen,
Andrew, your Orioles lost 24-2 over the weekend.
We're on a football podcast, Steven.
It doesn't
I don't know
matter.
why you want to bring
All
up them.
sports matter.
I'm ready to talk about Drake London. He's part of an upcoming conversation.
He is part of an upcoming conversation. Okay, let's take a break, and then we'll move out to some other skill possessions here on Buckeye Talk.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts will take the world by storm.
There's some big right out there, and you're gonna help me stop it.
Us?
Why, you got someplace to be?
On May 2nd,
Avengers are gone. No one's coming to save the day.
their time
I think we could be the people that are coming.
has come.
Being the hero, there is no higher calling.
Let's do this.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts. Only in theaters May 2nd. Get tickets now. Rated PG-13. Some material may be inappropriate for children under 13.
Switch to Verizon Business and get more from your internet without paying more for your internet. Get LTE Business Internet starting at $39 a month when paired with select business mobile plans. That's unlimited data, and with it, unlimited possibilities. Start saving today with Verizon Business, ranked #1 in small business internet customer satisfaction by J.D. Power. Starting price for 25 megabits per second LTE internet plan with smartphone plan savings, plus taxes, fees, and economic adjustment charge. Terms apply. For J.D. Power 2024 award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. We are trying to find out where Ohio State has any level of a case for being position U and where they don't. There's a long list of wide receivers, Andrew. I feel like we're about to spend 20 minutes saying yes to this question of whether or not they're wide receiver U or not. So for the sake of making this quick here, here's my question. When you looked at their recruiting, is there a get that is most impressive during this 6 or 7 year run? And then there's there one where you were just like, where's Brian Hartline's biggest hit that's not Jeremiah Smith? And where is his biggest, I guess, miss as Ohio State's wide receiver coach?
That's a good question. The hit, I think, it's either JSN or Marv.
Okay.
Because JSN was not, and you know this, JSN was not a highly rated recruit when he committed to Ohio State.
No, he wasn't.
And so I don't know how I feel about that. I hadn't thought about that before that you just asked me that. What was his biggest hit? Because you could make the case, okay, top 100 receiver who was the best receiver we think in school history, but before this other young kid showed up, who was the best receiver in Ohio State history. It's like, all right, well, he was a top 100 recruit who was not the highest rated recruit in his class. And I believe he wasn't even the second highest rated, or he was right there with Jaden Ballard with Marvin Harrison Jr. I believe like they were like kind of fluctuating and they were right at like the same ranking. And then Marv showed up and it was like, oh, okay, So do you view it as that, or do you just take it as he took this lower rated guy and then he was a first round pick who was really good at Ohio State? Now, granted, his 2022 season kind of went off the rails, with injuries and stuff like that. So maybe he would have maybe we're viewing him in a different light. Maybe we're talking about him in a different way, but that's probably it. One of those two guys. The biggest miss, he really doesn't miss a lot. I think my tendency is to just look at that 2022 class where you signed 4 receivers and none of them are here. Like Caleb Brown was your highest rated composite receiver, number 79 overall. Keon Gray's number 88 overall. Those are 2 top 100 receivers that just didn't make it. Caleb Burton, top 150, didn't make it. Kojo Antwi, 151, didn't make it. Like, I don't know if there's a single guy that you point out to and go, wow, that was a real big error on his part, except for Julian Fleming. So I think that's my answer. Like, there hasn't been a ton of them, but I think there have been areas to say, oh, well, this just wasn't as good. and I think it's Julian Fleming. So I kind of flip-flop there, but I think it's Julian Fleming. Just because he was a 5-star kid. We talked about him a lot. He played in, a smaller town, in a run-first offense, and then he shows up at Ohio State, and, things change. So, yeah, I think that's probably my biggest miss, the Fleming miss.
So here's the list. Garrett Wilson's a 5-star recruit in 2019. He's here for 3 years, a 2-year starter. He's a first-round draft pick. Jamison Williams was a top 100 recruit, 4-star recruit. He's here for 2 years. He starts one of those years, and he transfers to Bama. He's a first-round draft pick. Julian Fleming was the highest-rated receiver they had ever landed here. He was the number 3 player and the number 1 overall receiver. He's here for 4 years, a 2-year starter, and then he transfers to Penn State, where they just didn't necessarily use him. I think his body had just kind of broken down at that point. I hate calling players who deal with injuries busts and miss. I understand why you're saying it, Andrew, because 3-1, those are his rankings. So it gets thrown on them, but it's like Greg Oden. Is Greg Oden a bust, or did his body just break down? That's not him not being good enough. That's him never getting the chance to show he was good enough. Jackson Smith-Njigba, as you mentioned, top 30 recruit, 5-star recruit, was here for 3 years, 2-year starter. He's a first-round draft pick. G. Scott, top 70 recruit. He's here for 5 years, wins a national championship. He's a 1-year starter, but it's not at wide receiver, so now we have to put a pin in him. Mookie Cooper, as we mentioned earlier, was a top 100 recruit. He's here for 1 year and then transfers home to Missouri, where Ohio State played him in the 2023 Cotton Bowl. Mookie Cooper gets a win there. 2021, Mecca Buka, 10 overall, number 1 wide receiver. He's here for 4 years, 3-year starter. We think he's going to be a first-round draft pick. At worst, he's like a top 40 pick, depending on how the draft shakes up and what teams need. Marvin Harrison Jr., number 95, number 14 wide receiver. Jaden Ballard was number 99, number 15 wide receiver, to Andrew's point. They're like right there with each other. In fact, I know for a fact there were conversations that Marvin may have been the guy that they let go of if another person who ended up at Clemson wanted to commit here, but that's old news here. Marvin, 3-year guy here, 2-year starter, first-round draft pick. Right now, he's still the best wide receiver in program history, arguably, him and Chris Carter. A guy later on this list is going to have a say about that. Jaden Ballard, four-star recruit here for 4 years, never really had much of a role outside of a kick returner. Now he's at Wisconsin. Caleb Brown, Keon Graves were both top 100 recruits. Caleb Brown was here for a year and then transferred to Iowa. Keon Graves was here for 2 years and then transferred to Cal, where he's with Devin Brown now. Caleb Burton was the number 1 wide receiver in his recruiting class until injuries got in the way. He tumbled down to 132, was here for a year, and then transferred to Auburn. And now I think he's back in the portal. He might have landed somewhere already. Kojo Antwi, he was the longest tenured guy here. He was the first guy Ohio State landed that was outside the 150 at wide receiver in the Ryan Day era. 4-star recruit, was here for 3 years, more of a locker room guy than the on-the-field guy, and now he's at Colorado State. 2023, Brandon Ennis was a 5-star recruit. They've kind of rejumbled their rankings a little bit, Andrew, so now they have him listed as a 4-star, but he was a 5-star.
They do this all the time, and it makes me so mad.
I know, because they do it, and you're like, I'm trying to make a point here, man. And
it's like I'll write a story from I'll write a story here, for example, about the 2025 recruiting class, like guys that are already on campus, and I'll write the number 18 overall recruit, blah 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 blah, and then I'll check back in August, and it's like, oh, now he's number 17. No, he was 18 when I wrote this.
On signing day, I wrote a story that the 2023 class was the first time since 2016 that Ohio State had only signed 1 5-star recruit, and it was Brandon Ennis. He's in year 3. He's expected to be a starter now. Noah Rogers, top 50 recruit, 1 year here, and then went home to NC State. There were conversations that he might flip back home to NC State during his recruitment, so that really wasn't all that shocking. Carnell Tate, top 60 recruit, 3rd year in the program. He's about to be a 2-year starter. He's been a 1-year starter so far. Bryson Rogers, top 400 recruit, more the developmental guy here, and he's heading into year 3. 2024, you take 2 5-star recruits, one of which is the Monstar from South Florida. He's going to be a 3-year starter for you. Mylan Graham, top 30 recruit. He's in his 2nd year here and trying to push for more playing time. 2025, Quincy Porter's the 5-star recruit. And then he's already lost his black stripe. And you've got Phillip Bell, Bodkin Miller, and Desi Jones. In 2026, you've got another Monstar by the name of Chris Henry Jr. as a 5-star recruit. And you also got Jaden Ricketts as the in-state guy. And Brock Boyd, who you recently flipped from TCU Is that right, Andrew?
That is
TCU?
correct.
Okay,
TCU.
and then in 2027, you've got a smaller Monstar, who's a track star Monstar, and Jameer Brown is the number 3 player in the top wide
10, 4,
receiver.
7, 100 meter dash.
Yeah, man, Brian Hartline's good at this whole recruiting thing. Okay, so we all think they have a case. We don't have to do this. They've got 4 first-round draft picks. They could have a 5th this week, depending on what happens with Emeka, Ibuka, and then Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis, Jeremiah Smith, Quincy Porter, Chris Henry Jr., Jameer Brown. I don't know, man. Who knows? Yeah. Brian Hartline produces first-round draft picks. Anybody who has spent their entire career at Ohio State as a wide receiver and then left has been a first-round draft pick. This is also the only position group that has not taken a transfer yet. There's a chance that could change this year simply because, as Andrew mentioned, that 2022 class is just kind of disintegrated here. So this is not a conversation.
There was 4 of them.
There was 4 of them, and it disintegrated very quickly here. This isn't a conversation about quality. It's about quantity. You got to have enough bodies. And so there is a guy from BYU, Keelan Marion, who has gotten some interest from Ohio State, maybe as more of a kick returner than an actual wide receiver, because that's a quantity conversation here. Stefan, who is fighting Ohio State the hardest for the number 1 spot on wide receiver U right now?
If we were there's probably 2 schools that have the best cases. I think it's USC and LSU. USC is, and I don't have I should have jotted down the dates, so let me know if any of these guys are kind of outside the window, but USC has had a run of Jordan Addison, Drake London, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Michael Pittman Jr., I think Juju Smith-Schuster is outside that window. And LSU's had Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Kayshon Boutte, and Brian Thomas with the Jaguars. Now, I had a really good year. I still lean Ohio State. I think it's when you combine the recruiting and the on-field product and the NFL draft picks, and all these guys have panned out in the NFL too. Like, who would – I'm trying to think of who the worst is. Like, is it
Olave?
In
this era, it's probably, honestly, statistically, it's probably Marv.
Yeah, yeah, I guess you could say that.
Because the other 3 guys have 1,000-yard seasons at some point. Chris Olave is playing with Derek Carr, who's throwing it minutes and bars.
Right. So, yeah, I guess Marv's probably the answer. I mean, it's. I think we all understand that it was 1 year for Marv, and well, I'm sure it'll be fine. But yeah, it's been pretty wild, man. These guys are all so good at the NFL. Like that factors into a little bit. That's where I think LSU is like having this case too, because it's like I don't know how much we were talking about. I mean, I don't want to say like we weren't talking about Brian Thomas a lot, but like he wasn't the most talked about guy, and then he had this big year with the Jaguars, and it's like, oh, add him to the list, and it's like it goes back to that balance. How much does NFL matter? Whatever it may be, I think Ohio State's got the best case right now.
Yeah, frankly, I think there's one school that is battling Ohio State, and I think, frankly, LSU could look at it and say there's one school that's battling us, and it's Ohio State. Because Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, frankly, that's probably a better top 3
it is
than Ohio State's top 2, top 3.
Yeah.
And I understand there are some people who might be saying, oh, well, you're looking at it, Justin Jefferson's NFL career. Like, whether you want to have that or not, like, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase were part of the greatest offense in college football history. Like, their numbers were insane when they were at LSU. And obviously Malik Neighbors, he was a first-round pick last year. He was, third, fourth, sixth? Sixth. I think he was sixth.
He was wide receiver, too.
Yeah, he was wide receiver, too, behind Marv. And, Neighbors had a great year despite having pretty terrible quarterback play. So yeah, I mean, that is elite of elite at the top, and Ohio State is right there with them. Ohio State certainly got more quantity, I think. Just Wilson, Olave, JSN, Marv. Now you're going to throw a Mecca into that, and then what you got coming, we'll see with Ohio State. But yeah, to me, it's a 2-school race for wide receiver U. It's LSU and it's Ohio State.
Jamar Chase won the Biletnikoff in 2019 with 84 catches, 1,780 yards, and 20 touchdowns. That same year, Justin Jefferson had 111 catches, 1,540 yards, and 18 touchdowns. But the thing is, they funneled their offense through those 2. The next highest wide receiver was Terrence Marshall with 46. They threw it around that year.
Terrence Marshall was like a 3rd or 4th round pick, I think. Yeah? Like, he was like a draft pick.
I would love to. I want to do that one day. Let's have a conversation about LSU 2019 versus Ohio State in this like kind of hypothetical butterfly effect national championship game, because those numbers are absurd. But LSU also played in a lot of tight games that year, which is why the numbers were so absurd. They were throwing it around a lot. It's no different than in 2021, with Stroud, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, Chris Olave, and Garrett Wilson. They were awesome. Yes. They also had to be awesome because they were playing in a lot of high-scoring games because their defense couldn't get stops. I just think it would make for a good conversation one day. Maybe we'll do that in the dog days of the offseason at some point. When one of us is on vacation, the other two can just argue about it. So I guess here's the thing. I'm going to throw Bama in this too. They've got a Heisman Trophy winner. They had Devontae Smith and Jaden Waller both be top 10 draft picks. Jamison Williams was a first-round draft pick because of what he did at Alabama, not because of what he did at Ohio State. So you can throw them in there as well. Ryan Williams is on their roster right now. I guess I'll say this, because it is an Ohio State-LSU conversation. The way you lean depends on, which is why, Stefan, when you asked earlier, how much are we taking NFL production into account here? If you're going to lean NFL production, it's LSU. They have the two best receivers in the NFL right now. And Malik Neighbors had a better year than Marvin Harrison Jr., so that's your tiebreaker. And then Brian Thomas, as you mentioned, that's a guy that I don't know if people were expecting him to play that well this year. And yet, especially when your quarterbacks are an injured Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones, Brian Thomas and Devontae Smith at two different levels succeeded despite Mac Jones being their quarterback. So you lean that way. I think if you lean towards production, consistency, and shelving them out there, it's Ohio State. Because Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase are kind of like explosive lightning in the bottle, and then you just so happen to do it again with Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. But that's Ohio State every year, right? I don't know when the next time we're going to look at an Ohio State roster and go, they're not going to have at least one first-round draft pick. LSU's wide receiver history, even pre-2019, is so sporadic. It's awesome, but it's not as consistent as Ohio State has been over the last few years here.
I'm going to say something, and this might come across as like an excuse on behalf of Ohio State for people that aren't Ohio State fans that are listening. So I'm really not trying to make it that. There is something to be said about the fact that Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson are also both from Louisiana.
Is it? And I think Malik Neighbors might be too.
Yeah. So it's like
we're like, and even back then, like Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry were both from Louisiana. Yeah, they're just getting these guys out of your backyard.
Right, like Ohio State, like Olave's from California, right? Mars from Pennsylvania. Like you're going out, like you went out and got Jeremiah Smith from South Florida. Like it's very impressive what LSU has done, but I almost want to give Ohio State like an extra point. Like they had to go outside of their backyard to go get these guys.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Jamar Chase only went to LSU because he's at Louisiana. Like they had to recruit him, but it's like it sure would help if Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and all these guys were from Ohio, you know?
It's
an excuse that like Brian Hartline wouldn't want us making for him. But
no, but it's a good point because all four of those guys for LSU were from Louisiana. So it's essentially what LSU always does, which is why we made such a big deal about Blaine Bradford leaving Louisiana, because kids from Louisiana just don't leave. It doesn't matter whether or not LSU is good or not, which is why every coach before Brian Kelly has won at least one national championship, because at some point that talent turns into something. While Ohio State went and got them, LSU kind of had them land in their lap. So I agree with that. It's a good case for Ohio State. That's a fun case for Ohio State.
If you can recruit Louisiana, do it.
Louisiana, LSU, drive 45 minutes in any direction and you'll find a wide receiver. You might
my method to being the next great college football coach. I'm going to recruit Louisiana better than LSU.
Good luck.
Yeah, this is just exactly what this is just our NFL GM conversation. Hey, I need a receiver. All right, I'm going to scout 2 schools, and then we're going to move on with our day.
Yeah.
But it's also think about some of the mid or the G5. Like Tulane's been pretty good for a few years now. ULL's had good stretches. Like
Louisiana schools are just good because Louisiana football players are awesome. So if you want your player to be awesome, go live in New Orleans for a couple of years. Okay. So tight end. I don't know what it looks like for Ohio State, Andrew, to do better at recruiting the tight end position than what they have done over the past 7 years. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's good. I just think
It is.
it exists.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean that disrespectfully, but first of all, there's not a lot of 5-star tight ends running around here. But also, it's such a developmental position that I'm not sure how much we should put into the recruiting aspect of this when trying to have a who is tight end you conversation.
Yeah, look, Ohio State is not gonna claim tight end U, and I don't think anybody's gonna say that they should, right? Just to be very clear about that. But then this is a very philosophical conversation with tight end, because if you were a tight end, and you're trying to get developed, there are schools with histories like Iowa, like Notre Dame, Georgia has had really good tight ends in the past. Like, schools that not only have really good tight ends, but they feature them. Tight ends don't get featured in this offense. They might be secondary characters. They might be, role players, but they're not the part of the offense. Like I point to that 2022 Ohio State Notre Dame game all the time. I mean, Notre Dame's number one receiver that day, I think, was Lorenzo Styles. And they had Michael Mayer, who Michael Mayer was awesome. And Michael Mayer would have started at pretty much every school in the country, and including Ohio State. But that was it. So it's like, okay, how do you weigh that, right? How do you weigh funneling your offense through a tight end? So, you look back, like they had a couple tight ends in 2020, obviously G. Scott, but then you have Royer and Gerd. Sam Hart is in that mix. Bennett Christian is obviously still here. Jelani Thurman, kind of still waiting on him to pop. You bring in 2 last year with LeBlanc and Witten. You have Roberts and Lennon. Like, it feels like things have kind of solidified in the last couple of years, but like, I don't think you're looking at this tight end group going, this is really poor and this is a negative, but I don't think you're looking at this tight end group and going, well, this is just an NFL factory, because that's just not the case.
So here's their list. Joe Royer, top 400 recruit. He's there for 4 years. Then he transfers to Cincinnati, where he's from. Sam Hart, top 400 recruit in 2021. He's here for 2 years, and he transfers to Colorado, and then he's back in the portal right now. Bennett Christian, top 400 recruit. He's in his 4th year. So that's just, they're living right there at around the 400s. And in 2023, randomly they get Jelani Thurman out of Georgia as a borderline top 100 recruit. He's now in his 3rd year, where at worst he's tied in 4. I think at best he's tied in 2 if some things really pop off here. Max LeBlanc coming into his 2nd year here, top 250 recruit. Demarion Witten, who is, Andrew loves Demarion, by the way. But I think we're still another year until we find out what he is. Though it does seem like he's going to be a wide receiver long term. So maybe we should have put him in the wide receiver spot. But I guess we'll see. Nate Roberts, top 200 recruit. He's a true freshman now. And then Brody Lennon, who gets here this summer, top 300 recruit, borderline 300 recruit. And in 2026, you've already got Corbin Fordham, top 500 recruit, 3-star recruit in 2026 class. 2 transfers. Will Kazmarek, who's now in his 2nd year here. At best, he's tied in 2. At worst, he's tied in 2. And then you get Max Clare, who was the best tight end in the portal out of Purdue, entering his 1st year here. And then you throw the wrench in there of Cade Stover, who began his career as a linebacker. So there's a partial pin in this conversation because he was a linebacker for a year. But then he transitions over to the tight end room, and he ends up being the Big Ten tight end of the year and a John Mackey Award finalist. And he's a 4th-round draft pick to the Houston Texans in the future of their tight end room over there, Stefan. They're not tight end you. I don't know if they're ever going to be tight end you. So this is not the question I'll ask about the tight end room. But I will ask, do you think, right now Cade Stover is the only draft pick of guys who were added after Ryan Day was a head coach. Obviously, Jeremy Ruckert was here with Urban Meyer for a year. He was a draft pick. Luke Farrell was a draft pick as well. I think Max Clare is going to be a draft pick next year. And I actually think Will Kazmarek can get drafted. he might be like a 6th-round draft pick next year because everybody can always use blocking tight ends. Do you think Ohio State is maximizing its tight end play with what it is going to always be at Ohio State, where, sure, can you get 25 to 30 catches? Maybe, depending on the year and what other weapons are around you, but you block at a high level and you get drafted. Is Ohio State maximizing what its potential at tight end is going to be?
I think so, and I think G. Scott's probably the perfect example of that. Yep. How many times did we come on here last year and talk about different things that G. Scott did that was so impressive, and you look at the numbers and it's not impressive whatsoever. But like G. Scott, the different ways they used him, the different ways they moved him around was actually a very big part of that offense and unlocking some things, especially in the playoff when we saw them playing at their best. So I think so. I think so. I don't think Ohio State maximizing their tight ends to me is not a tight end getting 50 catches. Frankly, I'd probably be asking what's going on if that happens. But I think what they do with their tight ends right now, the way they're able to block, the way they move around, the way they can be weapons in the passing game when needed, I think it's pretty perfect for what you could ask for from that position.
G. Scott as well. Transition to tight end. He's a 1-year starter at that role. I agree with that. Andrew, do you have any issues with Ohio State's tight end recruiting?
Not really. I think it's been fine. Again, I don't think it's been great, but I don't think it's been bad. Like especially in recent years, like you go from Thurman in 23, to LeBlanc and Witten in 24, to Fordham and Roberts in 25. Or sorry, not Fordham. Lennon in 25, along with Roberts. Like you start to map this out, and you go, okay, pretty decent tight end recruiting here, and that's with the caveat that a tight end is not really ever going to be featured in this offense because, like, any tight end that gets featured in this offense, something bad happened to multiple receivers because the receivers are elite at another level. So
I want to have this conversation 12 months from now, because then I'm going to know whether I'm right or wrong about Max Clare and his touches here. And I think it's going to help kind of formulate an actual realistic expectation for what tight ends can be at Ohio State. Like, I don't know if so. Let's just say Andrew's right. Max Clare has 55 catches. Then is it unfair to say, hey, man, go find a Brock Bowers? Probably not. But if I'm right, and Max Clare, if I'm like really, really right, I don't think he's only going to have 16 catches. But if he has like 21 catches this year, then you can't go, hey, go find your Brock Bowers. Why would Brock Bowers come here? Brock Bowers has had 100 plus catches in the NFL. You think he's going to come here where he's not going to have any catches? But I just think last year and this year is such a crucial moment in deciding for, I think, us what should be realistic expectations for a pro-style Ryan Day offense, where it does seem like tight ends get the ball more than they did in the Urban Meyer era, but there's still wide receivers and running backs to throw the ball to. Okay, last break here, and we'll come back and we'll talk about Andrew's favorite position here on Buckeye Talk.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
So good, so good, so good.
Great gifts for mom? We've got them. And they're up to 60% off at Nordstrom Rack stores now.
You know they have Marc Jacobs?
Gotta show mom some love.
That is so good.
Snag amazing deals on Mother's Day gifts from Barefoot Dreams, Kate Spade New York, and more. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
And we're back here on Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Stefan, Krajisnik, and Andrew Gillis. Position you conversations, where Ohio State has a case and where it doesn't so far. Shocker, we've gone with quarterback and wide receiver, while tight end and running back. I think running back, they could eventually have a case. That's something that the conclusion we came to. While with tight end, They don't have a case. I don't think anybody is really worried all that much that they don't have a case here. Let's have a 15-minute conversation about the offensive line. Stefan, I want to start with you. Do you think Ohio State has a case to be an offensive line U right now based on their development of the position, the NFL draft output, and the way you have had to sit here and listen to me and Andrew talk about the recruiting over the last year and a half?
I would say over the course of the Ryan Day era, if we're looking at that window, no. If we're looking at historical, yeah, absolutely. But if we're looking at 2019 on, the answer is probably no. Although I think there's a chance for that answer to maybe change in like 2-3 years, because I think they could have realistically 3 guys going this draft. A couple of days after we're done recording here with Donovan Jackson, Josh Simmons, and I think there's a pretty good case for Seth McLaughlin to get drafted as well. And then kind of look at this line and the future of it. I think we all know that Ethan Owenyawa's got NFL prospects. They have so much depth and talent on the interior, and we see the way Austin Saraveld's moving up. I have to imagine there's some NFL teams taking notice, especially if he has a good 2025 season. So, and the recruiting is getting a little bit better from the early returns of Tyler Bowen. I think there's a chance that Ohio State could start entering his name into this conversation. I just don't think it's there quite yet.
Okay, Andrew, let's play a game. The game is called Hit or Miss with the offensive line. I'm going to name off guys that they've brought into the program, and your job is to tell me whether it's a hit or miss with a couple incompletes, like Harry Miller.
I was gonna ask you. He's the first guy I have on my list.
I think he was on his way to a hit, and then real life happened. He's a 2-year player here. He's a starter at left guard in 2020 as a 5-star recruit, and he's expected to take over for Josh Myers in 2021 as a starting center. Life happens. So he's incomplete. I think we should just disparage him from that. I think Ohio State and Harry, as a football player, did what they were supposed to do. Ohio State and Harry also did as human beings what they needed to do to make sure that Harry Miller had a long life. And he's doing well now. Enoch Vamahi, top 130 recruit. He's here for 4 years. He's never a starter. And he ends up transferring. Hit or miss?
Miss.
Okay. That's one miss so far. Ryan Jacoby, top 300 recruit. He's here for 3 years. He's never a starter. He transfers to Pitt. Hit or miss?
Miss.
It's 2. DeJuan Jones.
Smashing hit. Smashing
Such a hit. He didn't even let me finish.
Yep.
He's rated outside the top 1,000.
Yeah, you turned a top 1,000, not a top 1,000 offensive, no, not a top 1,000 prospect into an NFL draft pick. That's incredible.
A 2-year starter who has a tree in Buckeye Grove.
Yes.
And he's a 4th-round pick. That's a hit. Paris Johnson.
Hit.
Okay. Self-explanatory. Luke Whippler.
Hit. I don't know if you want to keep giving descriptions of these guys or if I should just say the name or if I say hit or miss after the name.
Yeah. I think he's a hit who could have been a bigger hit had he not left early. He's a 6th-round draft pick. I think if he comes back in 2023, he's a day 2 pick.
I agree.
Josh Fryer. Top 5.
Yep.
I think he's a hit.
I think he's a hit too.
Rated 502. He's here for 5 years. He's a 2-year starter. If he gets drafted, I'm not going to blow a gasket. Yep. I think that's a hit. If you can get a guy outside the top 500 to be a 2-year starter for you, that's a hit. Grant Toutant. I think that's a miss.
Miss.
Jacob James.
Miss.
James is in the 800s as a 3-star recruit. He ends up transferring to Toledo after 4 years. Grant Toutant played 4 years here, graduated, moved on with his life. Trey LaRue.
Miss.
Similar description to DeJuan Jones, rated outside the top 1,000, ends up here for 4 years, graduates, and moves on with his life. 2021, Donovan Jackson.
Pretty clear.
Okay. 5-star, 3-year starter, saved your season. Ben Chrisman, as a football player.
Yeah, he was only here for 3 years. That's a miss.
Transfers to UNLV, unfortunately passes away. Rest in peace to Ben Chrisman. Zin Maholski.
This is a miss. This was the one where you start to go, well, he was a depth player, and did contribute, and you can't expect everybody to be a starter. This was the guy where you start to go, well, it's okay if some guys are depth pieces, but I still think miss.
I think that
when he got his opportunity, it didn't go well.
Yes, that's what I was getting ready to say.
That's exactly
Grant Toutant and Trey LaRue were never good enough to play for you.
Yeah.
So you can have that conversation. They needed Zen Maholski to play, and we found out why he wasn't playing, which means after 4 years, he wasn't ready to play for you. That's what makes him a miss. He ends up transferring to Indiana. Tegra Shavolo.
I think that's a hit.
I think I agree.
I mean, he started for you in a national championship run, and despite a bunch of different guys that were kind of clipping at his heels, he was in the lineup.
Top 100 offensive lineman who in year 3 wins a starting job.
Yep.
That's a hit.
Yep.
Carson Hinsman.
That's a hit. He's the biggest hit of this class.
He's going to be a 3-year starter here.
Yeah.
That's insane. George Fitzpatrick.
Miss.
It's a miss because they didn't even consider him as an option after Zen Maholski went down. They went straight to Donovan Jackson. He's now at Kansas State.
Yeah.
Avery Henry is another one where incomplete life happened. He's doing well. He's still around the program. That's tough. That's 2 guys who are life just kind of got in the way. Luke Montgomery.
Hit.
Top 100 recruit who showed up for you in the national championship run, and now he might be a starter for you. Josh Padilla.
We're starting to get into the guys where you go, maybe this is incomplete, but it's not because of, like you said, life getting in the way. It's look, he's entering his 3rd year, but we don't know yet. Returns are positive.
Yeah.
Like it's not like he's got to get out of here. He's not going to play. So Stefan wrote a story. Seth McLaughlin praised him to no end. Like there are players that have really kind of talked about him a lot. So yeah, I think it's positive, but I can't say he's a hit because we haven't really seen anything yet. But I also don't want to say he's a miss.
He's our first true incomplete, and part of the reason he's incomplete is because there's a guy who's a hit still here.
Yes.
Austin Seravel.
I think we're at a hit. For as much as we say incomplete for Padilla, I still think we're at a hit with Seravel.
I think we got one. I've been listening back to some stuff from last fall. Ryan Day told us last fall that Austin Seravel was repping at tackle in fall camp in 2024. I cannot believe we missed that. Actually, I can because we were focused on a quarterback battle and the fact that the entire offensive line room was sick. But still, he mentioned it last year. After the first day of camp, he mentioned it. Miles Walker.
Yeah, that's a miss.
Here for 3 years as a guy outside the top 500. Now he's at Boise State. Okay.
24, and then
24 and on is too early. I think the only one you can start to evaluate in really any way is Ian Moore, simply because he's a top 200 recruit and he should be battling even if he doesn't win the job. The rest of that is Gabe Van Sickle, Deontay and Devontae Armstrong, one of which is a guard, one of which is a tackle. And then you've got Carter Lowe and Jake Cook and Javon McFadden in your 2025 class. And then so far, 2026, Maxwell Riley, Sam Greer, and Tucker Smith, Tyler Bowen off to a hot start. So here's, Stefan, where I want to bring you into this conversation with these transfers. Jonah Jackson.
I'd probably say a hit.
Yeah. 1-year starter as a transfer from Rutgers, 3rd-round draft pick. Josh Simmons.
Hit.
So it's 2 hits on the transfers.
I consider him a hit because when he was healthy, he was great.
And he might be a 1st-round draft pick this week.
Right.
Vic Cutler.
Miss.
Seth.
Hit.
And then you've got Ethan Owen Yawa and Philip Daniels on deck. We'll find out whether or not they're hits or misses this season. Okay, so I just did the math. We have 23 guys where we can have a true evaluation conversation about them on the offensive line for Ryan Day. 12 hits, 10 misses. And if you take out the transfers, you've got 10 hits and 9 misses and 1 incomplete. I don't think that's offensive line U territory, Andrew. But I do think it's not as bad as sometimes I think our language has been over the past 2 years here.
I think it's another one where it's probably better than you would think going into it.
Right.
I think the average person would probably say there's more misses than hits, and that's not true based on what we just did.
Like 2019, DeJuan Jones, he was an NFL draft pick. Paris Johnson and Luke Whippler in 2020, both NFL draft picks. 2021, Donovan Jackson's going to be a pick. So there's 4 guaranteed. 2022 class, you go, okay, we'll see about Hinsman and Shabola. I think Hinsman's trending that way. I think Shabola's trending that way, but we don't know yet.
I think they're both going to get drafted. I
think so too.
3-year starter at Ohio State, you get drafted. Tegra Shabola, someone's going to fall in love with what he looks like.
I agree.
And then,
yeah. So you have those 2, and then Josh Fryer is the true question mark.
Yep.
So like if you go through 2022, you've got DeWand, Paris, Whippler, Donovan, Shabola, Hinsman. So you got 6 draft picks, and then a true question, because like I don't think it would surprise any of us if we hear Josh Fryer's name in the 6th or 7th round.
No.
I don't think it would surprise any of us if we see Josh Fryer is a priority free agent signing for the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? Like whatever, I don't know. Like that wouldn't surprise me either if he's undrafted or if he gets picked. So I don't know. 19, 20, 21, 22. You've got 6 draft picks out of those 4 classes. It's not bad. Like it's not, I don't think, elite at a level like some other schools have maybe put out offensive linemen in the last couple of years. Like they had Paris Johnson. Like Iowa has had some really good linemen. It's the same schools as you always talk about: Iowa, Michigan, Notre Dame. Like those programs always have really good players, and I don't think you're at that level. But you're not scraping the bottom of the barrel here when you kind of map it out and you lay everything out like that.
So they've had 4 guys drafted so far. As people are listening to this pod on Tuesday, Stefan, they might. Well, they're not going to match it because they've only got 3 guys, but they're going to come close to matching that number this year. So they're going to be at 7 by the time we are recording another pod on Monday. Well, we've got other pods recording this week, but by the time we sit down to record our draft recap pod, Ohio State will have 7 offensive linemen drafted in the Ryan Day era. And 3 of them will have been transfers, and 4 of them will have been guys who you recruited and developed on your own. And then I think it's like running back. It's trending back in the right direction.
Yeah, I think you're going the right way. And like you said, if you can get 3 in this draft, you're feeling pretty good about it, and maybe even get a 4th in there. So I feel a lot better about this unit moving forward and their opportunity to be in the conversation than if we had this discussion like August.
So I think our conclusion here is they have 2 groups. Shocker, the wide receivers and the quarterbacks, which is what they've been known for since 2019, are the 2 groups that, yes, they're at the table and they're, quite frankly, probably leading the conversation. They're not the only team leading it, but they're at the head of the table or close to it at quarterback and wide receiver. And then 2 positions where things got a little iffy, which is why I'm glad we did this, but they're starting to trend in the right direction. And another group where it's just, I mean, it is what it is. And it's not a negative. It's not the tight end group is not bad. They're just, it's a quality side dish. It's your drink. That's what the tight end, they're your drink. You got a good meal, you gotta have a good drink with your meal. And as long as it's a good drink, you don't really complain about it. So that's just what it is here. Okay, this was a good exercise. Tomorrow we're going to do defense. Get the text, 614-350-3315. I cannot believe this is the first time I've mentioned that. 614-350-3315. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. We're kind of in the dog days of the offseason at this point. The transfer portal is open until Friday, I believe, or it might be open another week. Or is it Friday? Stefan, if you don't have the answer in front of you, it's okay. It's okay. We're not worried about that.
It's Friday.
Okay,
it's Friday.
On Friday. As of the time we're recording this pod, Monday afternoon around 2 o'clock, Ohio State has still not lost a player to the transfer portal, which I think is a good thing. I don't think they need to be in the business of losing guys right now. They need to be in the business of adding a few guys along the way. Some guys have already visited. There's a few people who are expected to schedule visits as well. So that's the first place we're going to go with that information, 614-350-3315. The NFL draft starts this Thursday. Stefan and I will be potting right after that. I think we're going to go live, plus plenty of other things that we're working on. 2-week free trial, $3.99 after that. For Stefan Krajisnik and Andrew Gillis, I'm Stephen Means, and that was Buckeye Talk.